Okay, we'll call the meeting to order for the Scott County Parks Advisory Commission for February 5th, excuse me, 2020. We'll start with roll call. Kristen French.
Here.
Kathy Gerlach.
Here.
Barb Hedstrom.
Here.
Jerry Hennon. Eric Spieler.
Here.
Patrick Stieg. I'm here. Mark Ewert.
Here.
And Commissioner Ulrich. All right. If you can join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Welcome, Jerry. The next item then is to approve our agenda, and I know Patty has a couple of additions.
Do you want me to go over those, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Okay. So, you feel free to laugh at me. I forgot to add election of chair and vice chair. So we would make that number 5. I also would like to add under the initial number 7B, if we could add an II, I want to do a work team update after the Cleary Maintenance Building update. If that is supported. And then also under number 7, if we can add an E, and we, that will be a 2020 PAC summer calendar review.
Does anyone else have any additions to the agenda?
Motion to approve as amended, Ewert.
All right, is there a second?
So second, Hedstrom.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, our agenda is approved. The next item then is to approve our meeting minutes from December 4th. So if you've had a chance to review those and have any comments on them as far as corrections or additions, you can certainly say now, and I'll give you half a minute to review those. Anyone have any changes or additions or corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion. Motion Spieler.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Hedstrom.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. And then we'll move to our new item 5, which is the election of our chair and vice chair for 2020. And first, we'll consider the position of chair. If there's anyone who would like to nominate a member of the commission or themselves, the floor is open for nominations.
Commissioner Stieg, if you are interested in serving a second term, I will nominate you, sir.
Okay. Any other nominations? All right, so we have one nomination for chair, being myself, to serve another year. Is there any other action we need to take other than to have a vote?
Assuming you accept the nomination.
I will accept the nomination, thank you.
Mr. Chair, do we need a second?
Yeah, shall we have a second since Mark made the motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for chair for 2020. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. And then for the position of vice chair for 2020, we'll open it up for nominations.
Who's the current vice chair?
Eric?
I think Eric done a fabulous job this last year. I think we should reappoint him.
All right. Consider that a nomination. We have a second. Do you accept that?
I do accept that.
All right. Any other nominations for vice chair? All right. So Eric has been submitted as a candidate for vice chair, and it's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. So we'll maintain our current chair and vice chair for another year. The next item then, which is now number 6, is recognition of interested citizens for items not on the agenda. I believe our audience is only staff members, so I'm sure we'll be hearing from shortly. Moving on to what is now item 7, Administration, Planning, and Development, and A, the Park RX America Initiative.
Perfect. Well, hello, Chair and Commissioners. Again, my name is Alyssa Delgado, and I'm the Parks and Natural Resources Coordinator for Scott County. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a national program that I know our Chair is very familiar with, but it's called Park RX and also Park RX America, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between the two. But to start off, I'm going to have us watch a video. All right, so that was a commercial that was promoting this idea of a park prescription. This is coming from this initiative that I was talking about, Park RX, which is a nationwide initiative that started on the West Coast in the Bay Area that encourages providers, both clinical and non-clinical, to prescribe a park or to give a park prescription like you would give a prescription for a medication to improve their patients' mental and physical health. So this is an example on the right of what a park prescription could possibly look like. It says having 3 days of walking or hiking in a state park per week. So it's this idea of using our parks as a means for fixing some of their mental or physical concerns with their patients. So this idea is based in scientific research that has shown that not only being in parks, but being in nature and being around trees has intrinsic benefits for our mental and physical health. And research indicates that it can improve maintaining a healthy weight, improving your blood pressure, and just overall health. That it can increase physical activity. That it lowers anxiety and depression. It also helps children become more social and resilient, and can also improve children's school behavior and grades. So this is a wide array of results from just spending time in nature in parks, and these are super awesome things that can help our community. So as Scott County, we're very interested in how can we bring these results to our residents, especially since we overlap in the parks realm. So the way that we've chosen to kind of engage into this initiative is that from the Bay Area on the West Coast, when they're talking about this whole Park RX and starting to prescribe parks, that inspired the creation of a nonprofit called Park RX America, and this is based in DC, so on the East Coast. And they created a scalable platform that allowed agencies from across the US to upload their parks so that they could be prescribed by providers, either clinical or non-clinical. So this is a screen grab from what the Park RX America website looks like. And this is showing all of the parks that are currently participating in the state of Minnesota. So there's definitely a large spread of who is uploading their parks so that they can be used for prescriptions. So with this site, a provider can go in and identify a park that is convenient or fits the needs for their particular patient. And to do that, they'd be able to select on one of these little location icons for the park, and it would bring up this sort of fact sheet. So this is an example for Cleary Lake Regional Park, and this is all of the information that gets inputted into the system on the parks end. So this is kind of the information sheet that a provider would see and also a patient would have the access to see, and it has a lot of different information. Something that I want to note is that the information itself and what can and cannot be uploaded is something that is dictated by the nonprofit because they host the platform, but the actual information themselves is editable by park. So things that you can edit are the amenity icons, so you can indicate what amenities are at the park. You can update the photos, you can update the simplistic map that is on there. You can provide park access information, so the hours or a phone number that they can reach, or a website or a link to events going on in the parks. And then some of the amenities are actually searchable, so if a provider decides that their particular patient needs an open space where they can sit and meditate, that's something that they could search for. Alternatively, they could search for a specific length of paved trails if they felt as though their client or their patient would benefit from walking. So as of right now, all of the Scott County parks are, the Scott County parks and the Scott County Three Rivers parks are uploaded in this ParkRx America website. So they are currently searchable by any provider that decided to subscribe to this program. So this is how we've decided to engage into this, because we felt as though it was a low risk scenario where we're just providing our information out there. But we also acknowledge that either how we are, Scott County is involved, and also how other potential agencies within Scott County, such as the cities are involved, can look a lot of different ways. So as I mentioned, we currently just have our parks hosted on this platform that anybody can search for, any provider that decided that they wanted to buy into the program could search for. And theoretically, that could be it. That could be all that we do within this ParkRx program. But there is room to make involvement look a little bit differently. Some agencies throughout the U.S. actually have like weekly or monthly programs that are geared towards ParkRx. So maybe they have a Saturday morning walk where people who have park prescriptions can come and they can fulfill their prescription that way. Or it could also, involvement could also look as hosting information sessions for people, whether it's once a quarter, just to kind of show people how they could use parks to fulfill their prescriptions, that parks don't have to be a place where you have to be super active. You can definitely also have a more health-minded approach to visiting parks as well. Or it could look a different way. So it's definitely involvement that is not set in stone, and it's more of a marathon rather than a sprint. But so far, our involvement initiated in November when partners from both Carver and Scott County got together at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum to kind of be introduced to this idea of ParkRx, to kind of brainstorm whether or not partners would be interested in moving forward and kind of how we would do that. Moving forward through December, that is when the Scott County Parks got added to the ParkRx platform, and then we also started collaborating more with Scott County Public Health to try and determine how we're going to move forward. Continuously, the Carver and Scott County partners have been meeting, so there's another meeting in January, there's another meeting coming up, kind of how we're going to make tangible steps forward to potentially launch a pilot program this year. And again, the Scott County Parks and Scott County Public Health have been brainstorming at how we are going to move forward on the Scott County side. And our next steps for implementing the pilot program is that we are trying to identify potential providers that will serve as champions, or that can look at the ParkRx America site, look at these park summary sheets, and kind of give us feedback on what providers in general would need from us so that they would buy into it, or they think that more providers in the area would buy into it. So we can kind of get a sense of what they would need so that they would feel comfortable prescribing, and so we could get something off the ground potentially this year. So with that, I know that was a ton of information, but I want to finish with an example from a local area group that has implemented a actual program that they do. So I mentioned it can look a lot of different ways for how you're involved in the ParkRx initiative, and so they have an actual program that they're involved in. So.
many studies that show that just being out in nature helps our mental health, our physical health, and our well-being. And so this is just another a way to get kids active and give them a taste of what they could do.
The main goal of the Power Up in the Parks RX is to start a conversation between the doctors, the patient, and the patient's family about getting outside. Your kid doesn't have to be in an organized sport in order to get the physical activity that they need.
We came up with the idea of giving somebody a prescription for something just like we do for antibiotics for an ear infection.
And then on the very last page of that guide is the Power Up in the Parks prescription, which is a prescription for 1 hour of play or more each day for kids and families. And so all kids ages 2 to 13 get this RX when they come in for a well child visit.
And so when I saw this pop up, it was a great alternative to some of the other things that we can do. We're hopefully going to talk them into the trade-in of their candy.
I think one of the important things is that you form a great relationship and a bond, and you're doing some quality family time together and a common interest.
I like going to the park because looking at the animals and the nature and being with family and friends.
I mean, what could be more fun than tossing up a big pile of leaves on a nice fall day? Well, maybe 2 piles of leaves.
So that was just a quick blurb about just from a local area example indicating that there are different ways to be involved in this program, but the Parks and Trails group and staff here definitely view this initiative as a new and a new and not necessarily better, but just a new approach to serve our community better and also encourage residents to visit our park. And hopefully by participating in this and watching it evolve and grow over time, we can increase our number of first-time park users and try and get people who perhaps aren't using the parks because they don't necessarily see how they fit into it. But if maybe they're getting prescriptions for them, they can see how they can integrate their health into the parks. And also just reduce the frequency of people being unaware of our parks, because if people are getting prescriptions to go to the park, they'll have to figure out where they are to go to them. So at this time, I thank you for your time, and I'd love to just open up the floor to discussion and feedback about the program and about any of the steps that we've taken. And also, if you have any resources that you think may be helpful for us moving forward, that would be great too. Thanks.
All right. Yes, Kristen.
Great presentation. Really, I'm impressed. What a great program and a new concept, to me, anyway. I like that. On the slide where you were showing where our parks are put in there, it was hard to see, and maybe it's there and I just didn't see it. Is there any area that talks about the accessibility of the parks? Because that would probably be something that might be really important in a doctor-patient where they're looking for that.
Yes, thank you for the question. So that is actually a searchable feature. So on our end, when we upload the data for the parks, you can click all these different aspects of what is accessible or not, and the provider can choose to search for that, and they will only select parks that are accessible.
Okay, and then same thing, I mean, in our parks, we don't have fees to get in, but is that clear too, that, you know, some parks do, some don't, you know, depending on what type of a park you're looking for? Is that information available?
Yeah, so that's also a great question. They do have a section that indicates if there is programming, and it indicates what type of park there is. I think I don't recall any section that indicates whether or not it's if there are fees, but there are links to more sites, and I think part of the problem with them creating the scalable platform is it's consistently evolving as well.
Correct.
An example of that is I know that up until a month ago, it didn't list the option to select City Park. And so that's recently been added too, so.
Okay, one final question. You touched on it briefly, and I guess who takes the lead on getting medical providers to buy into this program? And I know you talked about it a little bit, but I still don't quite understand.
Yes, also a good question. So that's part of the reason why public health and parks are trying to work together. For who exactly takes the lead to get them to buy in, we're just trying to make sure that we're presenting the initiative in a way that we're being transparent, and we're hoping that we can find at least a few providers that already kind of subscribe to this idea, and then they can hopefully help us. Part of the issue is, as parks staff, I don't necessarily know what the challenges are, how to necessarily get someone on board, but that's where having strategic partnerships and consistently meeting not only with Scott County staff, but also with Carver County staff, both that are in, some of the staff members are in the medical profession and some are in the parks profession, so we are trying to have open communication about how do we make this thing work.
Because that would be, to me, a huge hurdle is, again, there's the time issue and the connections and how do you find, where do you even begin? And if, that would be the hard part.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Maybe you or Alyssa could talk a little bit about the collaboration and where we're at with Carver, and because you really just identified the big, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe some comments on that planning team and what we are debating and discussing would be.
Yeah, Alyssa, I can add a little bit since I seem to be working on this every day in my job. So even you or Lindsay may not be as up to speed as to what's happened in the last couple of days. But at the last meeting of our Carver-Scott partnership, we kind of came to that conclusion, is that that's kind of our next big step, is to figure out what do the providers need in this program so that we structure it in a way that it's going to work. Because as you said, if that doesn't exist, it's a flop. It's been absolutely no trouble whatsoever to get the enthusiastic involvement of the parks people, but that's the other side of the coin that we're working on. We have, I think as Alicia showed on the slide, we have a lot of good partners in this, including some healthcare representatives. A woman from St. Francis in particular has been very active and has lined up meetings for me to meet with some clinic people as early as tomorrow morning. Okay. So
and your schedule was just
open. So yes, I'm meeting with a clinic tomorrow morning, and then I'm also meeting with a non-clinical mental health care provider in the afternoon, and then another one on Friday. So things are evolving pretty quickly, and at this stage, there are kind of some initial meetings, I guess, to hear what else we need to know. And then we're looking at possibly doing some type of roundtable event or a series of focus groups with different types of providers to dig a little deeper. So we make sure that we structure this in a way that's going to work for them. So that's kind of where we're at. We also have, we're thankful to have the involvement of some researchers at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health that are helping guide this as well. So we definitely are doing our homework to make sure that whatever we do is going to be a success. I think I think our ambitions are to launch the program with the information in a system like ParkRx America so that anyone can access it as soon as we're ready. But we also want to do just kind of a general public campaign, if you will, about the value of the public getting out and using parks more. But then thirdly, looking for a couple of clinical and non-clinical caregivers to actually participate in a pilot project that will evaluate the impact of this. So that's kind of where we're at. Just as you said, that's going to be the tough nut to crack, I think. The other place that has been pretty active in trying to launch this, besides what was done earlier in Washington County, is in Olmsted County. And even though they're a year ahead of us, they're still at the beginning stages too, trying to figure out how to make this work. Incidentally, given our infancy in this, myself and someone from Olmsted County and a person who's really leading the charge in the state at the Minnesota DNR are going to do a presentation on ParkRx at the state Healthcare Homes Conference in April. So hopefully between now and then we'll have something worth sharing and not just show up and ask questions of the audience.
Yeah, thank you for that input, Chair. And something I want to add, well, two things. One, something that, while it may be a new program for us and maybe new in Minnesota, it's existed for about 7 years, and it's particularly popular in the Bay Area where they have a lot more established buy-in.
Right.
So that's definitely comforting to know that it does work and that providers come back and they use it for years. So even if we haven't figured out all of the kinks yet, we know that there is a workability to it, which is comforting as opposed to starting something completely new.
Right.
And something else that I didn't mention previously is that, so the Scott County Parks are in the system, and we also have been communicating with the cities as well, and there's been a lot of buy-in from them. So we are trying to communicate and help them get their parks on the platform, and then for those who are super interested, we'll try and rope them into something larger as a program gets more established. But so it's not just a county parks initiative, the city parks are also really buying into it.
I had a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
How is this funded, and does it cost clinics anything to be part of it, or how's it funded to do the website and the updating and everything like that? And pay this executive director that's in.
I'll let Alyssa handle
Yeah,
that one.
that's a great question. Thank you, Commissioner. So ParkRx America is a nonprofit that manages the website, and they have employees and how they choose to fund their nonprofit. I don't know the ins and outs of where all of their money is coming from, but for who funds the other aspect of it, most of it's just staff time. Or if you were to have any sort of program that required a staff guide, it's going to be, there's no sort of like funding needed other than your own staff time or whatever, if you wanted to get grants to kind of fund any sort of project. But the website itself is taken care of by ParkRx America, which is the nonprofit. I hope that answers your question.
Other questions? Jerry?
I guess I have some input on this. My wife and I, we volunteer at PROAC, or New Options. They have 85 to 90 disabled people show up for, it's a 5-day-a-week program. We do go to parks. We do go to the mall up here in the west end of Shakopee. We go to Burnsville Mall, Eden Prairie Mall. So we do get out to exercise. Most of the people, if they walk from one end of the mall to the other, that's a 2-hour trip. So when we talk about disabilities, I mean, there's a wide range of people with disabilities. I mean, we're pushing wheelchairs, probably half the people in wheelchairs. And Clary Lake's got a nice 3-mile trip or loop around there, and these people would not use a 3-mile loop. I believe they would use, we go up to Lions Park, we go to Memorial Park. Memorial Park, they can walk from one end to the other. We bring the bus around because they can't walk back. So, so is there anybody on this committee that knows what the real needs of the severe handicapped people are? Or do you put everybody in, we'll do this, or let's send them all out to Clary Lake, and they're not gonna use it? So there's gotta be a lot of input, so does anybody on this committee know the real needs of people with disabilities? And a lot of people with, mental health, they don't get the exercise, and if they walk a block and walk back, that's a huge trip for them. So, I mean, I think it's a good program, but I think on the other hand, you gotta figure out who you're dealing with, and first of all, how are they gonna get there? That's number one, where a city park would be much more manageable to get there because there's a lot more of them within, blocks of their residents.
I appreciate the comments and the questions, Commissioner. That's part of the reason why we are trying to communicate with the cities, because we do know that the county parks maybe aren't the best fit for everybody participating in these programs. But by us trying to get as many parks on this platform as possible, we're hoping to at least kind of catch as many people or as many potential uses or as many potential prescriptions that patients might receive. On the flip side of that, though, is to some degree we can only do so much, and a lot of that does come from the providers being able to know their patients well and know what they need. So at least the way that I see our job as of right now is just providing as much information and as many resources as we can to the providers, because it's definitely, it is a partnership type program. You can't do one without the other. You can't have just the parks without the input of the providers, and it being an honest relationship, and that there being authentic attempts to try and help physical or mental health issues. So I hope that kind of addresses it. We do know that different people have different needs, and that for some, not every park is going to work. But by trying to get everybody to buy in, that's how we're hoping to fix that.
Just one more comment on that. Something you mentioned in your presentation that I hadn't really thought of, but is kind of reflective of what you were talking about, Jerry, is, for example, you said that you could identify a park that might have open spaces for meditation, and so that brings the point that maybe it's not a physical activity per se, that we think of as going a number of distance, but it's still maybe an outdoor activity, and I guess maybe that's something that hopefully through education of prescribing doctors, that they can identify some alternatives of what more able-bodied people think of as being, activity. So I'm not sure what that will be, but I think that's a really good comment that, that it needs to be really reflective of exactly what is appropriate for that patient.
Yeah, I appreciate both your comments, and I would just add that that's kind of why we're doing all this work up front with the caregivers and providers, is to find out what this needs to be so that it'll work for them and their patients. Because the way this should really work is the care provider should sit down with the patient or client and say, I think this would be good for you to spend more time outdoors. What type of things do you like to do outdoors? And then let's find a place that matches your interests and your abilities, and then that's what we write the prescription for. But yeah, those are all really good points, and that's why we're doing all this work up front to find out what we need to have in the system. Because, Jerry, I think your point about people with some physical disabilities, we need to make sure that the information that they're searching to find something appropriate for that patient is something they can actually find in our system. We make sure it's in there, exactly.
Yeah, it exists, yeah.
Okay, I'll give you one example. 2 years ago, we took a group up to Highland, to their nature center. And we were standing in front of that big window and all them birds out there. And we put some binoculars, put the strap around one fellow's neck, and he held him up. He saw a bird through the binoculars up close. He just, oh! And he dropped him. That was a home run to him. Something that we all take for granted. And this is something that, we can get out of our parks, but we got to get the right mix, right park for the right group of people. Yeah. Let's Go Fishing is perfect for new options. Yep. They stand there and, they just hold their pole like this, and they can't pull them in, but, they know they're fishing. So it's part of the activities.
And that's another thing, Jerry, reminds me, like I said, every day, something new. So today I actually had conversations with people from Let's Go Fishing, because in addition to the facilities and the amenities that we might have in our parks, we also want to know what interest or need there is for more programmatic type things, like Let's Go Fishing, for example. And so I contacted Let's Go Fishing just to clarify the question we had, Patty, of can an individual sign up for Let's Go Fishing, or do they need to be a part of the group? And they said, no, an individual can sign up as well. So we said, good. So a care provider could prescribe to the patient, why don't you go on a Let's Go Fishing outing if that's of interest to you. Another thing that I learned through the Scott Carver Master Gardener program is I saw they had a series of educational programs coming up at libraries throughout Scott and Carver County, and one of them was called Nature Heals. And I said, oh, I need to learn more about this. It sounds like a fit. And so I met with the Master Gardener Director this morning and picked her brain a little bit about, could that be a possibility if we have programmatic features in our options? Would that be a fit? And so she's very excited about it to see how we can expand this even further. So at this point, the sky's the limit. We have no idea what it's going to look like. And again, as you said, Jerry, the type of client or patient, whether it be in a clinical or non-clinical setting that this could be used for, could be very wide, of course, whole variety of health issues and concerns that could be addressed. So, any other questions? Jerry, one more?
I just have one comment. I would like to see them called as clients rather than patients.
Well, we've had some feedback on that as well.
Well, a patient, you're kind of looking poor. That I feel sorry for that patient. A client could be a customer of a business. So it's more of a level playing field than I'm up here and you're down here. You need me this way. Let's work together. I think a client would be a much better fit.
Yeah, it's definitely a working together thing between the care provider and the individual. Some of the early learnings we've found is that if you're in a clinical settings, they're patients. If you're in a clinical setting, it's a prescription. If you're in a non-clinical setting, it's a client, and it may not be a prescription. It may be more of an invitation. So we're sorting through all that type of stuff too, even the name. We haven't said our program is called Park RX or Nature RX or any of the other names for similar programs. We're gonna get that all figured out. Any other questions or any other comments, Alyssa? Lindsay? Anybody?
I have one that kind of reminds me. I just turned 65 and got on Medicare, the Silver Sneakers program. It's almost the same thing where here your provider, your insurance provider, is giving you this, it's just amazing, this card to go into all these clubs free and all these programs. And to me, it's embracing that whole philosophy that RX includes. Yourself out there and doing things.
Well, and one other thing I should mention, since I've got some of my co-project workers in the room and give you an update. Alyssa, you were at the last meeting. I can't remember if you mentioned, recall we talked about the Cycle Health and Sweat RX program. So this is a somewhat similar program, but it's geared towards pediatrics and pediatric patients. And in recent years, it's been adopted by the Twin Cities YMCA. And we have one YMCA in Scott County. We don't have any YMCAs in Carver County. But I met with the people last Friday who started that program and got some of their advice and input as well. And, it really boils down to what they said is, as they talk to healthcare providers, they say, oh yeah, I think being outdoors in nature is great for everyone. And my patients already know that it's good for them. But the question is, how do we get them to actually go out and experience that? And they said, you need to have that first step to get that commitment, similar to Silver Sneakers. You get them to sign up, so to speak, and then you're off and running. Otherwise, it's just somebody made a suggestion and I decided I'm not going to take your suggestion, like a lot of health advice goes. So hopefully we'll find the secret sauce here to make this a success in our two counties of Carver and Scott.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a couple of comments? You really could go all over with this idea. And we're sort of jumping in, and the technical side is new. Sort of our side of where do we want to go? Oh, well, where do the providers think we should go? That's all in the mix, and we're kind of learning as we go. And I think it'll be interesting as we continue with the planning committees to see what's intriguing by the providers in our area, if we find something that also aligns with maybe some Carver County and Scott County things that we're really, our initiatives that we're already trying to do. And I don't know, I'm assuming there's so many possibilities that we'll get there, But I'm interested to see that next step of, okay, now, are there things where it aligns with our vision and our goals? And can we package something with it and then put support behind it? Because if we want support, that's what we're gonna have to do. And then just, I wanted to mention that we've been looking at sort of the bare bones of this, of just getting the parks up on the site. And we pretty early on said, you know, there's quite a bit of data to first launch. We have a reasonable number of regional parks and trails. The cities have a lot of city parks. And Alyssa and Lindsay and I think some others have reached out and said, hey, this is what we're doing, and we're happy to provide some guidance. We're not going to do it for you, but we are looking at, as we move along, if there are township parks where this makes sense, that's probably maybe an area where we would commit staff time to say, does it seem legitimate that they should be on here? Do the townships want them on here? And that's something that maybe we can provide support for. So just a couple of things I wanted to let the commission know that we're thinking about. And then I'm really looking forward to the next few months, what more we find out. It's a fun project.
Other comments, questions? Jerry?
I just have one more comment. My sister-in-law just went in a nursing home in Shakopee, and if we take her out this summer in a wheelchair to push her, the only place to go is around the parking lot. My mother was in Chaska. You know, you go along a street with a busy street to push her. You know, I mean, there's a number of senior assisted living places. Would this group be addressing what are, you know, to get them out of, you know, you don't need a bus or anything, you just push them out the door with a wheelchair, but what is there? You know, I mean, they could be connected to nature also by just walking through some flowers or something. You know, and are we addressing, you know, what quality of life outside of the nursing home do these people have? Reason I bring this up, I could be there tomorrow at my age. Oh, so, you know, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, it's looking at it completely different than parks, but it's the needs of people that I'm looking at here.
Yeah.
You know, every segment of the population.
Yep. No, Jerry, again, I think that our Scott Carver group is really looking at that too, in terms of how do we make this accessible to as many people as possible, no matter what their circumstances are. And I think the other thing that you touched on when you talked about giving them just some exposure to some flowers, I think that's kind of what the research shows too. Obviously, we've got wonderful park systems here that provide those great opportunities, but you could very easily come across a patient who says, well, you know, I used to spend a lot of time out in my backyard because it's got trees and a lot of birds, and I don't do that much anymore. And the prescription could be, well, I want you to go spend time out in your backyard for 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week. So it doesn't have to be a infrastructure project that's publicly owned. It could just be our own backyards, like you said.
I think the newer nursing homes, from what I've seen looking around, are addressing that more with the pathways and gardens and bird feeders and things like that.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. Is there any kind of studies going on to see, kind of follow up to see if there's good benefits from this and actually cost savings for some of these health departments with, you know?
Alyssa, do you want to touch on that?
I don't know, you said the Bay Area had it for 7 years
Yeah,
now.
excuse me, that's a great question. I don't know of any conclusive studies as of right now, but I do know that some are in the works to try, and because that's a question that this type of initiative is getting a lot. So I don't have an answer for you to hand something to you today, but people are working on it.
Yeah. The gentleman who started the program, Parkworks America in DC, Dr. Czar, I think he recently received some NIH funding to look at that. And then the researcher that we're working with at the University of Minnesota is waiting to hear about some funding from NIH as well. And so we potentially could be a part of his research work with what we're doing here, because he's very engaged with us now. So. All right, anything else? Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Wearing my Carver County Public Health hat, it's an absolute pleasure to have Scott County so engaged with this in Carver, and I look forward to working with all of you more on it, so.
Thank you.
So the next item then is our informational items. The first one, A, is the legislative update.
Greetings, commissioners. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly, but I did want to take time to at least have a little bit of an update. So the Scott County Board, as you know, approves a legislative platform every year. And this year, we have 3 Parks and Trails related items, 2 state bonding projects, and I have a couple of slides on each of those that I'll go over in a minute. So 2 state bonding projects, and then something related to the Parks and Trails legacy funding formula that we're keeping an eye on. And I just wanted to mention that we're sort of kicking off our in terms of being at the legislature on a regular basis. That's just kicking off here in the next week. Staff will be meeting Monday mornings at the Capitol. From the county park side, that includes myself and Claire, and we meet with the 9 other regional park agencies and various lobbyists, so that will be starting up here. We've had a couple of pre-session meetings already, and then just an FYI, the Scott County Legislative Breakfast was held this past week. That's something that Claire Roebling and the county board and Leslie and Gary before her organize every year, and I was able to participate in that. So the first state bonding project that I'll just really quickly cover is the Miriam Junction Trail project. So I'm not going to get into all the detail on this handout, but I thought it was a pretty good visual to remind us where this trail is located. So first of all, I want to mention that the orange area is shown. That is where a trail gap exists. The bright yellow that you see on the very top of the image here where it says Carver, that, and Pat, Commissioner Stieg probably knows what that is. That's the section of the Minnesota River Bluffs Trail that exists today that comes in through Carver County right down to downtown Carver, city of Carver. The project that we're proposing would build a little over 2 miles of paved trail and 4 bridges, one of which would be a Minnesota River crossing, pedestrian crossing. And it would go through the Minnesota River Valley. And on the south end, you can see there's another bright yellow line. That's existing regional trail as well. So really this project is proposing filling in this gap. Of course, the trails to the north are a part of a much broader trail system. The trails to the south and east really only extend to Seavers Corn Maze. But someday we will have trail heading eastward. This is about a $9 million project. We're very much working in partnership with the Public Works folks on this. We had proposed it, or we submitted the application several months ago. We participated in the bonding tour. When the governor released his recent recommendations for bonding projects, this was not on it. I don't know why. This is a little bit of a long shot, so we weren't totally shocked by that, but we're still hopeful, and it's something that is still on the county's list, and it's actually moved up in priorities from the county side in terms of how we talk about it. So I would say it's getting some attention, and there's some momentum. We have partner meetings with Fish and Wildlife Service, the DNR, City of Carver, that are kind of ongoing. And I will continue to give you guys updates on it. Any questions at this point?
Commissioners, any questions? Patty, I just have one question, and somewhat jokingly, but has there been like design work or master planning or anything at that level done for this trail?
Oh, Mr. Chair, good question. We have a master plan for this. This was one that Andy Hingeveld worked on several years ago when we did our, well, actually, no, this wasn't part of the big 5 master plans at once effort. This was when, at the time that we were acquiring the railroad, we did the master planning effort. So that would have been in, I think, like 2009. So there is a master plan. This is part of the regional system. We don't have that to work through. And there's really cursory engineering plans.
Okay.
I wouldn't even call them preliminary, they're cursory. The Public Works Department has, they believe, identified some funding that we might be able to, prior to this being funded, to take our engineering plans up a little bit more in depth or to the next level.
Okay. Well, and part of the reason I was asking is the Minnesota Valley State Trail that runs along the river, at least for the last couple of years, is open during the months of December, January, and February if you want to go through the snow. Otherwise, it's flooded. So hopefully this one can be engineered in a way where it's less flood prone and people can actually use it and cross between the two counties.
That is a really big question, yes.
Yeah.
The folks that are, the Public Works folks that are working on this project know the area pretty well, and that is a big, yes, how do we approach this and have it be usable? Yeah. Absolutely.
Any other questions on this one?
And then just to clarify, so it doesn't reflect it on this presentation, but there are additional trails through there that are part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, right? I mean, there's soft trails and snowmobile trails and all kinds of things in that area, correct?
Yep, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, technically the state trail goes through this area and it's unpaved. And it was flooded, and so they relocated it this year. So part of our partner meetings is exploring what does that mean? Is there any opportunity where this could somehow benefit the state trail? That's a question that's out there, so we'll continue to review that. We've also are looking at, is there any connection or benefit related to snowmobiles? Because the snowmobile trail follows the state trail in this area. In the city of Carver, there aren't any trails that come there, so it doesn't right into the city, the downtown city. Commissioner Hedstrom looks like she would point to me. Maybe you've been on a snowmobile over there.
Oh, you mean snowmobile trails?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right, go on.
So there's not like an opportunity, there's not a big snowmobile system on the Carver County side right there in the Scott County where somehow this bridge would help open that up. We were kind of hoping for that, although I don't know that the width of the trail would allow it to be multi-use because there are some restrictions there. So we are, the snowmobile trail, the state trail are topics we're looking at. Whether or not we can find a solution that benefits both, and is mutually beneficial just to get any trail in here, I don't know, but we're working on it. So stay tuned on that. This would definitely be a destination trail. Yeah. The second state bonding project is the $15 million for the whole Metro Regional Park System. And just as a reminder, the state, the Met Council, and local jurisdictions definitely partner, and we have for decades, in terms of funding the capital project, our capital needs for development and redevelopment, not only in Scott County, but in the Metro Regional Park System. And that's why we every 2 years ask for state bonding. The Metropolitan Council, with permission from all of the local jurisdictions, requested that Governor Walz include the $15 million for Metro Parks in his state budget. He did not. He included $10 million. And this may sound familiar because this happens frequently. When the Met Council asks the governor to put X amount, and then the governor puts a different amount, Met Council staff can no longer be out in front pushing that other dollar amount. And all that means is the agencies do a little more work, and we're used to it anyway. So the 15 regional park implementing agencies are still asking for $15 million, and we're not going to miss a beat. It's just sort of, if you hear about anyone talking about $10 million in the governor's budget, it's because that's what the governor said, but we will work towards $15 million. If there is $15 million approved for state bonding, the really significant part of this is that automatically leverages $10 million in state bond from the Met Council. And if we were to get those two funding levels, that would mean $870,000 for Scott County. At the lower amount, I think we would lose about 350,000, if I remember correctly. If you might remember that in the last 7 years or so, our state bonding dollars have fluctuated and haven't been as healthy as they once were. And so for a number of years, we haven't really planned on this funding. We don't right now have a project selected for this. The last few years, we've identified with the county board several potential priorities, something at Cedar Lake Farm, introducing something at some use at Doyle Kennefic. I'm forgetting, I think there was a third, Cedar Lake Farm, south end of Cedar Lake Farm, Doyle Kennefic. There was a third. In any case, I will be going back and workshop in having the county board review those priorities and provide some guidance for us on what we should be sort of zeroing in on in the next 5 years, and how we might bundle funding from several sources with this 870 if we are successful to make a meaningful project. Standing alone, this 870,000 could address smaller projects, and maybe that's the direction the board will give us. But in the past, our practice has been to bundle several years of legacy and bonding funding to do something meaningful. So at this point, wanted you to be aware, we're asking for this amount. We'll be meeting with our legislators, and I can continue to update you on email, so you know who's supporting us and sort of have talking points that we've done in the past. All that will be forthcoming in the next couple of months. Any questions at this point? Okay. The third item on the legislative platform, we are keeping an eye on the Parks and Trails Legacy funding formula. It needs to be reviewed. That was the direction from the legislature. At this point, my understanding is that, so there was a group of folks from each of the agencies that received this funding, the 3 systems, I should say, that are a part of a group that will make a recommendation to the legislature on the new funding formula, or maybe the same funding formula. And I had an update recently, and the idea is that they will have their recommendation available in June, which causes a question in my mind, because if it's in June, that's typically after the legislature has adjourned. Is that the right word, adjourned?
Yep.
So I don't know if that's maybe a worst case scenario, and the funding formula they'll report on it, and then it will be taken up in the next year's legislative session, or if we've misheard or there was misinformation. So more on that, but we are still going to be tracking this doggedly this year. And I want to go over some of the basics of the county's platform related to this. And some of this will sound familiar. So,
Patty, if I could just interrupt, I actually was talking to the DNR about this today as well. And you are correct, that work group is scheduled to meet monthly through mid to late May. And then they will be coming up with their recommendation in conjunction with the Parks and Trails Legacy Advisory Committee. And then it is supposed to go to the governor in June. So he then would make a recommendation to the legislature the following year for the new biennium of funding.
Okay.
Yeah. And potentially multiple bienniums after that.
Yes. All right, thank you for that update. Okay, so the current funding formula, we reference it as the 40-40-20. And as you can see in the chart here, the Metro Regional System receives 40% of Parks and Trails Legacy funding. The DNR receives 40%, and Greater Minnesota receives 20%. With Greater Minnesota Parks and DNR covering fairly similar geography. And if you look at the data below, you can see that the metro area, residing in the metro area, we have 55% of the state's population and 45% residing in Greater Minnesota. And then in the metro area, we know that we have 60 million visits to our regional system each year. We know that there are a little under 10 million visits to state parks each year, and we still do not have information on the visits to the Greater Minnesota Regional Park System. There's certainly other justifications or information that can be considered in the dialogue. If you were to just look at these 2 data points, the county's position is that the minimum that would be justifiable for the metro region would be to receive 40%. And really, that's in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to share. So similar message as it has been the last several years. Any questions on this at this point?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, I'm
If I
sorry.
might. I have a question just in general, Patty. So the context is there was a large article in the Shakopee paper just last week about how Representative Tabke had managed to get 3 park projects approved in the governor's bonding bill as it relates to, and the whole article sounded as if it was a done deal. So I'm confused now when I hear you talk, because it's not, I mean, we're talking about what's the timeline to actually have the bonding bill before the legislative body to approve?
So we have until the final day of the legislature to potentially have our project in a bill and approved.
Okay.
Yeah, so the bonding tours that we were on with Tabke included our project. He was, I think, successful in providing support for those other ones. And as it sits, I think that's, great news for northern Scott County. And hopefully we'll get this other one too. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Because the governor doesn't just make his recommendation and that's, accepted. It's the budget, or the governor makes the governor's recommendation, and then both houses make their recommendations, and then a lot of stuff happens and a lot of dialogue, and then it all comes out at the end. So between now and hopefully, what is it, mid-May that's normally the wrap-up? Hopefully it doesn't go much more than that. I'll keep the commission updated, and I'm sure we'll be looking for support, contacting our local legislators, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll keep you updated.
I guess I have one question.
Yes, Jerry.
I'm sure nobody can answer it, but is Scott County a winner or a loser with legacy money? Do we pay in more than we get out? And I'm sure nobody knows the answer, but it would be an interesting answer to get sometime.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I do not know the answer to that. I know that it comes up a lot for the metro region, especially when we're talking about the new funding formula. I've, over the years, heard many comments about, is the metro region a loser or a winner in this? And I don't know that. I don't have the answer for Scott County. You ready to go on to 7?
Oh, yes, I'm
Or
sorry.
7B, I should say.
7B. I thought we were still on the other one. Yes, clearing maintenance building update. Please go ahead.
Real quickly, Jason Zemke, the project manager, provided this update. The construction is going really well. It's on schedule to be completed this June. Sort of the structure itself is complete. The interior, of course, is not. It's fully insulated. They will be doing the interior underground plumbing and electrical work. Well, I guess they started about a week ago, so it's probably still in process. The concrete floors were supposed to be started this week, and then they're hoping that the roofing and siding will begin in February. So we're on track. Here's some photos.
Oh, great.
Wow. It's exciting. So I will ask, maybe I'll reach out to Jason Zemke and ask if we could perhaps get a tour at our May meeting. We'll see how it looks on our calendar.
Patty, you may have just said this, but what is the anticipated completion date?
June.
June, okay. So I know when we had the meeting there, like the day before the old building was torn down, we did discuss possibly hosting a summer meeting there once the new building is complete, so, yeah.
So that's an option as well. And then I believe that we're gonna have some sort of celebration with the commissioners, and I believe the maintenance folks are hoping to do that in September and October, when things have really greened up, because they're gonna have to spend a lot of time making things look pretty. There's sort of some pros and cons, so if you were to do it in June, it's all brand new and clean and nothing, nothing's muddling it up.
Yeah,
But I think that they wanna wait until September, October.
great. And then work team updates?
So this is from Justin. I'll move through this real quickly. Ski trails are open. They've been grooming them when weather permits. They're busy and people are enjoying them. The Murphy ski trails are open, and the Knob and Kettle trails are open. And I'm looking at Commissioner Spieler because he probably knows more about
I haven't
this
been there
exactly.
yet.
Okay.
A little bit too dangerous still out there.
Yeah, the Murphy ski trails are definitely on the expert side,
Yep.
would you say? And there's one loop called the Razorback Trail, and that has remained closed all year. We really do need quite a bit of snow for that trail to be opened, but I also wanted to mention that sort of our ongoing lag in being able to get projects done is starting to show. This is one example of where the continual erosion issues. Murphy has sandy soils. We're always struggling with erosion, whether it's related to ski trails or horse trails. And they have not been able to spend as much attention there in the last 4, 5, 6 years. And this is one area where we're seeing, had we been able to address this yearly for the last 5 years, maybe we'd be closer to having those open. So I wanted to mention that. Dog parks are busy. The Cleary and the Spring Lake bike trails are also real busy. Apparently, MORC, the Minnesota Off-Road Cyclists Group, has groomed the Murphy Mountain Bike Trail, and that's been real busy. I wanted to mention that the maintenance folks, they get involved in installing the aerators every year on the lakes, and that's something that maybe folks are not aware of. And then they also monitor those weekly. They're already starting to look at golf equipment. They're servicing that right now. They finally got to some brush piles that we've needed burned for about 6 years. They're doing ash tree removals at Cleary, trimming at Cedar, and then of course they're a part of the maintenance building team tracking and supporting that project and that work. So just a real quick, wanted to touch on a few things.
Quick question, how many trees were taken down at Cleary? Because I noticed that this past weekend.
The ash tree?
Yeah.
I don't know, I can ask.
Okay.
They tried, they proactively, the commission might remember, take trees out, they try to every year. In the last couple of years, that's another thing we haven't been able to get to. And the thinking behind that is if you take some out every year and then you're continually replanting, when we have major ash borer issues, we'll be ahead of it and won't be as expensive. But I can ask.
Okay, if you don't mind. that'd be
Yeah,
great.
Justin
Thank
can
you.
reach out to forestry and see what the goal is.
All right, anything else on that one? Okay, we'll move on to item, let's see, are we now? Item C, under 8, I guess, Advisory Commissioner Reports. Any
Mr.
commissioner? I'm sorry, did I miss something?
I also have an update from our facilities team.
Oh,
and
good.
from the
Oh, I'm sorry.
recreation
Good,
secretary.
good.
So this is from Tom Bulk and his team. So they're prepping for the Fat Bike Fun Race that's taking place on the 16th. They
I
have.
think it should be the 15th. I think it should be Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know.
Yes, that is Saturday the 15th.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, should I actually ask them to change it, or is that, are you
Well,
joking? Is
I
that
think
the-
it really is on that Saturday.
Yes,
Oh, I'm
it's just
sorry.
the wrong
I
on the
wish it was, I
slide.
wish it was on that
No.
day. That worked better for me.
I'm so sorry. I think I put the 16th on a lot of things.
Some things say the 16th, some say the 15th in this package, so.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. I will clarify. They're participating, they do 2 booths at the Minnesota Golf Show. They're prepping for the opening day of golf registration already. They very much are supporting the Free Play Snow Day that's happening on the 29th. There'll be lots of activities going on, and I have more information here in another couple slides on that. Every Sunday, they're hosting the Minnesota Youth League. That was started in January, and that's through the end of the ski season. And they're planning already for their summer hiring. And they said that Tom indicated that the ski rental's doing really well. The last 4 weekends have been super busy. So that's all good. Any question about the visitor services and facilities info? Okay, real quickly, this is from Tyler. our rec programs coordinator. He wanted me to share that the winter programs this year, the enrollment is the strongest that he's seen. So I thought that was really great. That's been something he's really been working on, and we've been lagging, and I'm happy to report that as we're doing well. Free play snow day, as I mentioned, is on the 29th. And Tyler has coordinated free ski lessons that day at Cleary. If weather conditions decline, those lessons will be moved to Highland, just FYI. So spread the word, get on social media. This is a really great opportunity for people to have an entire free experience with rentals and lessons. And then just wanted to mention that that Tyler and crew are already setting dates and planning. They're almost done with their summer programs and camp planning.
All right. Now we're ready for advisory commissioner reports. If any commissioner has anything they'd like to report on?
I have
Yes.
one comment. Maybe you could invite some docs to that free ski
Oh.
day. That's
That's a great idea.
Um,
Great idea. Very good. Anything else from anyone?
The trails have been really good, except for yesterday and Monday because of the warm weather.
Yeah.
But I've been out there on Sunday afternoons, and that's when the Minnesota Youth Ski League's out there. And there must be about 40 to 50 kids out there at any given time on like Sunday afternoon. It's fantastic to see them. So
Super.
people have been there early in the morning, at 6:30 in the morning. They've been there late at night. It's really good.
That's cool.
Fantastic. Good. Any other commissioners have anything to report? Okay. Move on to item D, upcoming events. I think Patty hit the two that are on our agenda here a minute ago. Is that right? Or did
I did.
imagining that? Okay. And anything else? Any other things you wanted to highlight?
I don't. I was going to take just a minute and grab my cell phone, and maybe I can check that date, just so I can report on it. Did you do it?
Okay, so it's
Thank
just
you. Thanks for
wrong on the
to the
slide.
audience.
All right, very good. All right, then item E. Since we've all been on this group for some time, you probably recall that we oftentimes make a few adjustments in our summer calendar meeting schedule, particularly June, July, August. So if you are prepared, we could consider whether or not we want to make some alterations for 2020. And so then we'll have all our dates set, or if you're not prepared, you need to go home and check a calendar or whatever, we can bring that up in March. So whatever your preference.
If we can do it in under 5 minutes, I would suggest we do it tonight.
All right, so we want to attempt that?
Yep.
All right.
Under 5 minutes, Mr. Chair.
All right, let's see what we can do. So typically, of course, we meet the first Wednesday of the month. And I think between the 4th of July holiday and the first week of August is when we've kind of made some modifications. I think, as I recall, we meet at our typical meeting time the first Wednesday of June. And then between those two July and August dates, we pick one date, and then we don't meet again until September. So anyone have a date that they want to suggest so that we wouldn't be meeting the first week of August and July?
Do you want to go with what's proposed?
Where's what's
Or
proposed?
can we skip item B?
Or,
On the screen?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
move it to late July or something?
yeah. I mean, this would obviously still give us 12 scheduled meetings on what's proposed here, if that works for you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I'll just add that we have a couple of times also had picked a date for August and kind of track what was going on.
Oh,
And
yes.
so, I mean, that's an option as well.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I made the EB proposal, the July, the regular scheduled July meeting would happen on July 1st. And one of the reasons I'm proposing to move it to June 24th is that the joint board meeting is on, I think, July 9th. So I just felt like, we were kind of timing those with at least a week or so in between. And we could potentially we could move the August 5th meeting to the 12th as a tentative. Or just have, I'm sorry, have the August 5th meeting as a tentative meeting and not move it at all.
Well, I know that, and this is the question all you can answer, Patty, but in the past, we've also tried to take into consideration a family gathering you usually have the first week of August.
That might be why that's on there.
I think that's typically why we want to look out for your interests as well. So if that's a date that would cause you some heartache too, we can certainly look at either moving it to the 12th and have that on the calendar, but possibly one we might not need.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm fine, I'll just put my 2 cents in right now. With the proposal that we see on the screen, June 3rd, keep it scheduled, July 1st, move to the June 21st, and August 5th, move to August 12th. I'm fine with that,
Okay.
just to try to.
Keep things moving on here. Any other comments or suggestions on what we have proposed here?
Yep, I'm not aware of any conflicts for me, so.
All
Yep,
right.
I'd like to do that also.
Okay. Well, then let's go ahead with that. Keep our June 3rd meeting as scheduled. Move our July meeting to June 24th. And move our August meeting to August 12th.
Well, and I like the idea, I mean, the tentativeness sometimes, especially when it gets that August.
Yeah.
I think you, Patty, and the chair are always good about that balance of what's needed.
Well, we'll go with these dates then, along with obviously all the other first Wednesdays of the month for 2020, and we'll consider our calendar set unless obviously we have a reason to cancel a meeting or make any other changes. So, great, thank you for that. Hopefully that met the 5-minute conversation limit. All right, moving on. Item 9, upcoming meetings. Some potential agenda items for March and April. March being the wayfinding draft final and a workshop to support renaming the Scott West Regional Trail. And then in April to look at the 2021 budget goals. Other things that anyone anticipates coming up in March or April meetings?
Mr. Chair, I have a question, and I put it on the slide so I wouldn't forget. I'm wondering if the Park Commission would be open to adding about 30 minutes to potentially to the March meeting. We, with the wayfinding draft final and then a pretty robust workshop, it's gonna be a fun workshop, where we're hosting a few different experts to do an exercise with the Park Commission to get some sort of inspiration for our trail name. I'm thinking we might need a little more time.
So you're suggesting the March meeting we would start earlier, or?
Start earlier or go later, and that's just I'm throwing it on the table to be discussed.
Okay. People comfortable with that, having a little extra time on March 4th, either knowing that we'll have a workshop to follow the regular meeting? No objections? All right. We'll plan on that then, a little extra time on the 4th.
Do we have a sense as to whether we're gonna do it early or run longer? My preference would be to run longer, but.
Keep our usual 6 o'clock start time? That'll be fine. Okay.
That's fine with me too.
That's what we'll plan for then. All right. So that takes care of item 9, I believe, and our new item 10 is to adjourn this meeting and then go into our workshop session. Is there a motion to adjourn
So
this
moved,
meeting?
Ewart.
All right, a second.
So second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, our regular meeting is adjourned. We'll move into workshop session, and are we moving to the other meeting room, Patty?